Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to shift our focus a bit to look at the non-native trees that are now part of California's landscape. These are trees that didn't evolve here. They were brought in, often for very human purposes, and over time, they have taken root in our cities, our wildlands, our entire region in sometimes surprising ways. Let's begin with one of the most familiar sights in Southern California, the tall, slender trunks of the Mexican fan palm, Washingtonia robusta. Though it's become iconic, lining Los Angeles streets, framing freeways, it is in fact not native to the coastal and urban parts of Southern California. It's native to the Mexican states of Sonora and Baja California. Its introduction to the Los Angeles area is tied to urban development and promotion of a tropical image. For example, plantings surged during the 1920s and the 1930s, especially in preparation for the 1932 Summer Olympics and as part of the city's growth and landscaping. So here you see a tree introduced not for ecological restoration, but for a certain urban aesthetic and marketing of place. Next, let's talk about the iconic blue gum or eucalyptus species, Eucalyptus globulus. Originally from Australia, this species and various other eucalyptus were introduced into California around the 1850s. For instance, one record states that in 1853, a clipper ship captain named Robert Waterman commissioned seeds from Australia and planted them in the Sassoon Valley near San Francisco. The why behind it is especially interesting. At the time, California had a serious shortage of timber and fuel wood, rapid growth in population, and many settlers believed exotic, fast-growing trees like eucalyptus could help meet that need. Also, they were promoted for drying wetlands to reduce malaria risk, and as windbreaks or for firewood. Over time, large plantations of blue gum were established across the state, something like 16,000 hectares planted in early booms. But as time went on, people discovered that while the trees grew fast, they were not ideal for many of the timber uses promised. They twisted, and the wood quality was lower than expected. So you can see how non-native species often came in with high hopes, large-scale planting, and then a period of re-evolution. Then there is Ailanthus, commonly called Tree of Heaven, native to China and Taiwan, introduced to the United States in the late 1700s as an ornamental. In California, this species was brought in during the mid-1800s during the Gold Rush era. Chinese immigrants arriving in California planted it, in many cases, both as a familiar tree from home and because it was tolerant of disturbed soils, mining sites, and new urban environments. What you begin to see is a pattern. Non-native trees brought for ornament, for utilitarian reasons, or because they could survive under harsh conditions. And today, they're part of our landscape. Why does all this matter to you as arborists and to the ecosystems of California? Because trees are part of ecological networks. A native species often has many interconnections with local insects, fungi, birds, mammals, and those relationships build up over long time spans. A non-native species may not have those same deep relationships. For example, while eucalyptus may provide shade, its leaves and bark are oil-rich, drop in heavy amounts, and the litter decomposes differently. One study of eucalyptus in California notes that some ecological trade-offs emerged once large plantings matured and naturalized. The Tree of Heaven is often found in disturbed urban edges, abandoned lots, or roadsides rather than in intact native ecosystems. And because it spreads quickly, alters soil chemistry, and competes with natives, it is considered invasive in many parts of California. The Mexican fan palm may look decorative, but in many wild edges it has spread beyond where it was intentionally planted. So the big question becomes not simply, can the tree grow here, but how does the tree behave here, and what is the long-term ecological cost or benefit? Let's bring in a little more story. Back in the mid-1800s, as California's gold rush brought waves of miners and settlers, the landscapes were transforming. People cleared woodlands, they planted fruit trees and exotic ornamentals, and forestry was viewed through a largely utilitarian lens. The eucalyptus planting boom is a perfect case. Introduced around the 1850s to meet fuel and timber demand, massively planted in the later 1800s, then by the early 1900s, many growers realized the limitations. Not far from Los Angeles, palms were planted to sell the image of sunshine and paradise to eastern US residents. The fact that palms became icons of the post-war LA aesthetic, part of the movie set image of the region, is rooted in both landscaping and promotion of the California dream. Tree of Heaven, often overlooked, has its own urban story, tolerant of largely disturbed sites, planted or spreading along railroads, mines, and urban fringes. Its success is rooted in human disturbance and change, not so much in ecological fit. So you see the timeline. Introduction, mass planting for specific motives like fuel, image, or quick growth, then spread. And today, you walk through a city and see the results. How should this inform your work? First, when you're selecting or working with trees, even non-native trees, you want to think about their history, behavior, and context. If a species was introduced with a specific agenda and large planting campaign, as with eucalyptus, it may now behave differently than originally expected. If a tree is known to spread aggressively or compete with natives, as with Tree of Heaven, you'll need to account for that. And even in urban environments where the built setting is very different from wildlands, impervious surfaces, compacted soils, heat islands, a non-native tree may be chosen because it can survive there, but survival alone is not enough. You'll want to assess what ecosystem functions it supports. In Southern California specifically, where urban sprawl, altered hydrology, fire stress, and changing climate are all in the mix, the choices of trees we work with matter more than ever. A tall skyline of palm trunks may look Californian, but if most of them provide little shade, support little wildlife, pose increased maintenance or fire risk, then we as arborists have to weigh those trade-offs. The same with exotic trees planted en masse. For example, eucalyptus groves planted long ago in anticipation of timber that now call for management and consideration of fire, structure, and ecosystem fit. In closing, non-native trees are part of our California story. Equal parts design, economy, ecology, and culture. They remind us that human choices shape landscapes, sometimes for decades. Our task in our field of work ahead is to see how those choices play out, not just in single trees, but in the patterns of planting, survival, spread, and ecosystem influence. As we walk into the field, consider this. Every tree has a backstory. Who brought it, when they brought it, and why? And as arborists, we're part of the next chapter of that tree's story.